Welcome to episode 30 of Paranormal Unwrapped with Krista Raisa and Jack Roth. Krista is a channel, teacher, and artist. Jack is an investigative journalist, author, and award-winning filmmaker. Jon is a filmmaker, consultant, explorer, and much, much more. Welcome everyone to the episode, and check out Extraordinary This Seating, available on Facebook. It's the second part of a series by j3films.com. I have the honor of introducing to you Jon Sumple, internet class. You've made it this far. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
What's your view like?
Considered. I'm looking right now outside. Nice day out. Probably it's getting cooler here. I'm in Argentina, so we're moving into it's fall, so we're moving towards winter. And actually, this morning I could see up in the mountains that aren't too far away that there's snow up in the higher elevations. So yeah, it's heading in that direction. And we had no intention of being here during the winter season. So we're in lockdown in Bariloche, Argentina, and at least through the end of the month. Most likely longer, but we're making the best of it.
Cool, man. Yeah, and we appreciate you coming on the show for sure.
I have nothing else to do.
Well, this is a kind of weird show for me. Definitely a weird show for me because you're my partner in crime in these documentaries and in J3 Films. So I'm going to put on a different hat.
Goes back even a little bit further than that.
Oh, way back. Yeah, 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, Krista. Yeah, we go back a long way.
How did you meet? What's your story in Partners in Crime?
Well, we met we both worked at a company in South Florida called First Marketing, and I worked there for 20 plus years. I think Jack worked there for a cup of coffee. Drink a cup of coffee. You were there a year and a half or something like that.
If that, yeah. I'm not a corporate guy. I can't do it.
We met in the lunchroom one day, had a conversation about sports and kind of got connected through that. But then he was cast for a role in our annual Christmas play. We did a reenactment of some famous films, and Jack played the Tom Cruise role in what was the name of the film?
Rain Man.
Rain Man.
What do you mean, Krista? Really? Like, really?
It's just very random.
You're not surprised?
No, not back in the day. Not when
you played Rain Man at the Christmas play of your work.
Well, we shot a video, and Jack played that role, and we actually went to the airport. This was back before 9/11, so we actually went to the airport at night. It was probably around 9 o'clock, and we were able to step inside long enough to shoot before anybody came and told us to leave. So we were only in there for maybe, I think, 10, 15 minutes tops, and we never
it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, or nobody came in and said anything to us. So a short scene, like only a minute long clip. So it was kind of cool. But that's really got to know each other.
That's how we met. But Jon, now that I should mention this, I was thinking about that the other day. Do you have any copies of that? Because I'd love to see that again.
I do have both, I think, videotape and I think I have them ripped to digital files as well, but they're sitting in a container in a storage unit in Seattle. So they're somewhere.
Do you guys have a really big stockpiles of film? Like, as a filmmaker, I can't imagine all the things and tasks that you have to do just for one film, and so it's kind of a epic relic. I imagine you have those big spools with the film coming off in the tin cans. Is that what your guys' house is like?
That's the old, but back in those times it was all videotapes, so VCR tapes, and then smaller digital tapes. So a lot of tapes. I had a ton of tapes, but now everything's digital files, so we manage everything. But just for example, for the last film that we did, we had over 60 hours of interview footage pared down to an hour and 45 minutes. So yeah, quite a bit of culling of the different files and footage that we capture.
And how did you got no, that's not a good question. when you guys had that acting stint, were you guys more into the sort of study of film, or were you already producing stuff on your own individually?
Well, John was he was always into directing. He had done some corporate videos. I wasn't into. I had gone to film school, and I certainly wasn't an actor, but I could pull off a little scene like that. That's about it.
He was great.
But John was awesome. Yeah, well, it worked out. Yeah, well, I was young. You know, I could pull off Tom Cruise back then. Now I don't know if I could pull off Steve Buscemi. Maybe I don't know. You know, who knows? But in the day, Krista, when you didn't know me, yeah, I could pull it off. Thank you very much. That's right. So yeah, but John though was always interested in directing. I was always a writer. I was always an idea. Like I love to write stories. But right, John. And then we did some footage. I think I told the story, Krista. I told you the story in another episode. I think about when we went to New Orleans, and I took some photographs and at a haunted plantation. One thing led to another, and we wound up shooting 30 hours of footage in New Orleans for a pilot for a TV show. It never happened. It never nothing ever came of it. But we were on our way. I mean, and then we just life happens. I mean, we didn't live in LA. We weren't. This is one of those stories, and I'm sure other people can relate to this. We weren't LA people. We weren't. Well, I was born in New York, but it's not like we lived in LA or New York. We weren't actively pursuing careers as filmmakers all these years. It just wasn't. We were doing other things and then had a passion for filmmaking. And then I was always on John about making documentaries. We got to do documentaries because, I mean, we're not going to, unless we raise $1 million. And back then it cost, you couldn't do anything for under $5 million because there was no digital. So everything cost a fortune. So it was just like, well, let's make documentaries. We can do that. It'd be cheaper, blah, blah, blah. And then digital came along, right, John? And then social media, and it made it a lot easier.
And now it's huge. Everyone wants a documentary on Amazon. And
anyone can kind of do it, but it's doing it well that, we always wanted to do that. Right, John? I mean, you're the guest. You should be telling the story.
Now, what's interesting about that, though, it is, you look back and when we were playing around in 1995, it was videotape. And so you're editing in more of an analog mode where you're taking two tapes. You're taking a master tape and you're taking a raw footage tape, and you're assembly editing or insert editing, on 2 decks, which is a completely different world. And then we get to the point where we move into nonlinear digital platforms that makes everything so much easier to edit, for one thing, but also capturing on digital cameras. Originally it was a digital tape and into digital files. That changed everything, really for us, and made it a heck of a lot easier. But you look at where even the J3 Films started in 2009. Well, it really wasn't J3 Films. It was another company, a production company that Jack and I were a part of, and we wound up taking over the project that we were working at the time, the Stan Romanek project, and forming our own company. J3 Films, I think it was in 2011. But in the 10 years, since we've been working on this, there's been an evolution, even from that point of view. The biggest thing that we had to see happen is, we're going to make something. It's going to cost us, $100,000 plus to make the film. And how do you get it distributed to the point where you can make the money back to pay back the people you took loans from? And maybe at the end of the day, make a couple dollars for yourself. That's probably the biggest misconception that people have when they see these documentary films. One of the comments we hear all the time is, well, why isn't this for free? Why isn't this available? Everybody needs to see this. It should be for free. We'd love to do it for free if we had deep pockets and, we never had to worry about where the money came from. But at the end of the day, we raised funds in order to make the films, and most of the big chunk of money comes in the form of loans. We don't do investments. We don't want to go down that path at all. So it's loans. People give us a loan, we give them a percentage on the back end, and we have to pay them back. So anybody that makes a film, they don't make it for free unless they have deep pockets and can do that. But even the distribution game has changed since we first got involved. First it was Netflix was the goal because Netflix was buying content like crazy. And then Netflix made a decision, I think it was like 2016, 2017, where they said, no, we're going to do all of our own original content. We're not going to buy content anymore. And they rarely would buy content. They still did, which changed the game, yet again. We were like, okay, now what do we do? If they're moving away from buying content, then it was more going into the digital platforms, the advertising video on demand platforms is the new frontier, which we're on right now. And fortunately, knock on wood, it's been a huge boon for us, especially, and I hate to say this, but the epidemic right now is keeping people indoors and they're looking for something to do. And we're seeing a major bump in viewership as a result of that, which is awesome, because our goal from the very beginning was to make content that was accessible to the masses as opposed to a targeted audience on the fringes, and get people talking about something that they might not have talked about before. And when we have the opportunity to get more eyeballs on it, the conversation increases. And when the conversation increases, awareness increases. And when awareness increases, there's more of an opportunity to tell more stories, which is exactly where we are right now.
Right. Go ahead, Krista.
How did you, how did you get, this is where it gets paranormal. How did you get into that topic? You pretty much just answered my next question. So
But Jack owns
why Stan
that.
Romanek? Yeah. Was it
Jack owns that story.
Was
completely.
it the ghosts of Gettysburg? What made you say we need to film this and tell people?
Back to 1997-ish.
95.
Yeah, 95 was when you
19
captured the images.
Yeah, when I first captured, like, okay, we all had that moment, right? Each one of us here and people who were watching this, they know that moment when they got something happen in their life that changed everything. And we all have that moment. And so it's like kind of we wake up. When's that moment we wake up? For some people, it's much earlier than others. Some people never wake up. But for me, it was that year when I took those photographs, and there were freaking full form apparitions on 2 photographs that I had taken. And this was film. This is with film camera, not digital. And I had taken it, so I know they weren't messed with because I took the photo. So I knew I had captured something, and that was the beginning of the journey. But gosh, Jon, because I want to make so people don't get confused. So right now, you have directed, and we have produced Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story. That was our first film. Mm-hmm. The second one is Extraordinary, the Seeding, which is also out now. It's been out, and it's on Amazon Prime, among other things, and you can talk about that. And then now we're also in post-production on Extraordinary Revolution, which is kind of a working title. Working title. It's all part of a trilogy because the first one, the Stan Romanek story, did so well that at the time, The Orchard, now 1091 Media, was like, what else can you do? Let's keep doing this. So we came up with the idea to make it a trilogy and brand it as Extraordinary, this trilogy of films, because there was so much to tell. We kind of ended it at a certain point with the Stan Romanek story, but we knew we needed to dig deeper. So let's talk about that. So I'll lead us to that moment, Jon, and then you could take it from there and talk about that. So basically, I took photos. Yes, Krista, I got involved. I got really into the whole paranormal thing.
You're reading my thoughts, because it's like you have this fire, and I'm like, where does this fire come from? This guy had some kind of experience for real.
Jack is the fire. Jack is definitely the furnace. When it comes to this, the driver of the passionate driver of this, and that where we work so well together is he does the deep dive, and really is passionate about the content. And I consciously made the decision when we first started working on the Stan Romanek film, and I'll let you finish the storytelling there, Jack, to get us up to the speed. But I think it's important for people to know that I am not on the same level as Jack when it comes to awareness, knowledge, research. That's really his area of expertise and passion. I've consciously made the decision not to do that because I wanted to be as objective as possible. So I want to take the perspective of the viewer, somebody who might be a skeptic, somebody who might be questioning why, so that whenever I'm sitting across from somebody doing an interview, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of the person who's asking the same questions that's watching it. So we also made a conscious decision not to direct our content toward people who are already believers. We wanted to reach people who might be middle of the road or non-believers or didn't know what they believed in, and try to reach the widest audience possible. So as a result of that, I just made a conscious decision that I would walk wide circles around the outside looking in, dipping my toes into the water, keeping a sense of curiosity and a willingness to learn, open-minded perspective with it. But my approach from the very beginning was always that I'll walk around the circle, the outside of the circle, and I'll let Jack live in, dead center. And he's the one who's developed the relationships with a lot of the people and have kind of brought me into the equation. And I don't become buddy-buddy with anybody. I become more of a inquisitive interviewer. So it's worked very well. That dynamic that we have is a very good yin-yang, as opposed to, not to say that he has an agenda. I think, we all have an agenda, and our biggest agenda for us as J3 Films, and I know for Jack and I in particular, is to search for the truth. What is the truth? Where are we going? Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? Type of thing. So that's always been a driver from day one for us. But I think that dynamic that we've established, where he is doing the tough research, the understanding, the eye-opening stuff, and then brings it to me to the point where, sometimes I'm just dumbstruck and awe-inspired by some of the things that we're learning. And then I just kind of take it from there, from the, more of a sense of innocence and not uneducated, but not as plugged in. And I think that's a good dynamic. I don't have an agenda going in. I'm just as curious as the next person.
Right. And first thing before anything else is you're a storyteller. So you don't have an agenda. You're not like some of these people who get up and talk about, I did this research and I believe in this and the world is ending next week, or whatever they're saying. So, you're the person you're the perfect filmmaker from the standpoint of you're going to direct, and you also have that director's kind of mentality. You understand how to piece a story together, where I'm coming at it from getting excited about, I understand storytelling, and I know when I see a good story. So it's like, John, and then John and I'll get together and be like, John, you're not going to believe this. And boom. And the next thing. But John, you got to give yourself a little more credit, because during this course of time, starting with the ghost stuff, we've shared experiences. It's hard to, you've been really good at staying on the outside, because you have literally experienced some life-changing stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I would say that, I had experiences, we'll start with the ghost stuff, because that's really was the impetus for this. And for me, the belief of ghosts was something that I strongly believed in as a kid, because the town that I grew up in had a lot of activity. And I had friends in junior or even in grade school, elementary school, who lived in haunted houses, and even had a good friend that my dad and I played him and his dad in tennis, and we would go over there and they would tell us stories about the things that happened in their house that would just kind of, most people would make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, but that was just part of their everyday living. So I knew a couple of other people in school had hauntings. I had then heard of the Warrens. Back then they were from the town right next door. And one of the things that they would say is they wouldn't talk about Newtown, Connecticut, because that was a portal. And it's not some place that they would even talk about because of the activity that was there. So yeah, was very much aware of that at a very, very young age and open-minded to it. Saw on 3 different occasions before I was 12 years old, UFOs in the sky. So open-minded to that. My dad worked on projects connected to NASA, so I was, definitely into the whole space program at a very young age. So I had open-mindedness, as it pertained to that. And I would also say at a very young age, I struggled with religion. At 4 years old, questioning religion with my parents.
Right.
So,
well, you were a free thinker. You're a free thinker.
Yeah.
I think
so
we all were.
Open-minded to it all. And then you have things that happen to you through the course of these journeys. But I wouldn't say I would ever put myself into any of those other than the projects that we worked on. And I would say that the benefit goes to you for introducing me to those opportunities. Because once I came into those opportunities and the things that I experienced while I was in them, it makes you wonder, what is true? What is the reality? And I think that so many people are willing to go through life with a clearly defined construct of what their belief system is, and would rather not, challenge it. And I think where Jack and I are rowing in the same direction is that we want to challenge that. We both want to look for answers to questions that are asked, but there's no conclusive evidence as to what's right, what's wrong. And I think it's very easy to just become complacent in that this is who we are, this is what we're doing, this is why we're here, when we don't know for sure. Maybe there is something
Right.
different that we haven't been exposed to before. And we talk about this all the time, is that if you look back in history, there are times when people believed that the Earth was flat. And then there were times that people believed that the Earth was the center of the galaxy, and it wasn't. We're a solar-centric. What is it? Solar? I just forgot what the name of that was. But the sun was the center of our planetary system. So there's been so many different belief constructs over the years, over the centuries, over the millennia that have changed as a result of new information coming out. So as things unfold over the course of the next 100 years, we're going to be exposed to newer and different things that we haven't even thought about before. So that's just common evolution and awareness. And in the fact that new information is coming at us so quickly, those things will advance even more. They'll advance faster than they would have in the past 100 years. So yeah, definitely open-minded to all that. But we've had some pretty interesting experiences together, both in the haunted space, paranormal investigations that we've done together, as well as some of the things that we've experienced as a result of the 3 films that we've worked on.
Right. And I think the whole J3 Films is evolved from that kind of mentality of, we need to know more. People need to understand that it's a what if thinking. What if this is not true? What if this is true? Right? What if what you brought up with, like Krista, sometimes I think about, I always go back to that moment when you had that moment when you were in your car, right? Weren't you with your mom in a car, and all of a sudden your head started buzzing? I mean, you were just, you lived your life, right? And then all of it, I mean, my God, how do you digest that? How do you kind of absorb that and move forward with that?
It seemed, well, did you guys have a phase where you felt, I'm sorry guys, I had to just plug in my systems here. I didn't even realize that I didn't have it plugged. Is what after the event, you trying to explain what happened later, the storytelling part, and as a 20-something, and maybe you had the same thing, and in your 20s you feel slightly rebellious because you're out of your parents' home or your family home, and you're like, hey, this is who I am, but the world responds to you if you have that sort of attitude, like, I don't care what anyone thinks, this is what happened, but then you have to intellectualize the spiritual event or whatever it was, emotional event, to explain to people who just have no connection to what happened to you. And then you kind of refine it into like a fine wine so that others can enjoy it. And it's like the story changes a little bit, maybe.
Well, I think the big thing with that is that I think that anybody who is a believer of something has had an experience. And versus somebody who has never had a paranormal experience, who's never witnessed a UFO, who's never had a psychic experience, who's never had a deja vu moment. Maybe they can be excluded from, they could have more of a gee whiz response to something. But people who've had those experiences, chances are that they're going to be curious enough to do a little bit more research, or at least be a little bit more open-minded to it. Some people might be frightened by it, and that's understandable if it's something that they've grown up not believing in, and all of a sudden are thrown into it. But the thing that we've experienced more than anything, I would say collectively, Jack and I in particular, and as well as a couple of other people that are working on our team now, but Jack and I, our history goes back 25 years. And when you start having all these collective experiences, it makes you realize that what you've been led to believe or what you've been exposed to your entire life is not necessarily the reality. Sometimes maybe it's just energy and we're not aware of it. Maybe it's different dimensional things and we can't quite put our finger on how it all works, but there is definitely something going on that we're not aware of what it is. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've taken away from it, both from things that have happened to us in the moment. Some of the paranormal investigations that we've done were absolutely mind-blowing with some of the things that we had happen to us, and some of the high strangeness that we have experienced as a result of working on the Stan Romanek case. And then the collective stories that we have heard, that's been probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the course of the last 7-8 years, is once the film about Stan Romanek went out and people saw it and started responding to it, hundreds of stories have come our way where people have shared what has happened to them, to the point where that really led us to make the second film, because we compelled to continue the story, because there are so many people out there who are saying, this happened to me, this helps me realize that I'm not alone, this helps me realize that I'm not crazy, I have other people who've had experiences similar to me, that I find comfort in that. Yeah. And we're not talking a handful, we're talking hundreds, if over 1,000 responses via email and social media as a result of that first film going out. And since the second one launched in last September, same thing, we've had probably another 1,000 or so responses that where people have shared their personal stories that this has happened to me. And when you start to hear that collectively, a lot of people are like, oh, tinfoil hats, or those people are fringy loonies. We've been talking to people who are upstanding citizens in society, business people, people who don't want to have their stories told because of who they are. And we've been privileged because of the work that we've done and the quality of the work that we've done and the integrity that we've put forward, is that people trust us. And I think that's something that I know we're all very feel tremendous amount of satisfaction and reward, is that people do look at us as filmmakers with integrity. And some people, we're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And I think that the people who are not huge fans of the work that we do are the people who already believe, because they're looking for more proof. They're looking for something that is, riveting and blows their socks off. And our mission is to bring the story to the masses. So, we've taken a step backwards and decided that we wanted to educate everybody, as opposed to the people who've already had experiences or who've already done a lot of research. So we may not be the cup of tea for somebody who's already been, down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and has a clear awareness of what's going on. We've tried to reach a much, much larger audience, a global audience, with the messages that we're creating in our stories.
So besides the funding that you mentioned, I have a lot of questions. I don't have even time to give you feedback.
I got all day.
Yes. What are some tips what are some of the obstacles that you came across in the very beginning, before you were even thinking in terms of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, or did you basically what I'm asking is, were you just kind of good at this? Because maybe I'm biased. I really like your guys' style. I like the whole package that you guys kind of, come with. And, because I know these guys in real life. So, what were some of the big, huge challenges you'd say in the past 30 years?
And you're in the second film.
Third film.
Second. Oh, third. Oh my gosh. See, I get confused, and we'll get to that in a second. But yes, good question, Krista. That's a good question. I mean, Jon, really, obstacles. I mean, first of all, the money's not quite that, right? Like we're lower.
Yeah, we're not millions of dollars. I mean, just, to give people an idea of what it costs to make a film like this, we try to keep our budgets really low. And we're fortunate enough to work with people who are really, really good at what they do in post and music, Patrick Lomentini and Anton Patzner, the work that they've done for us, specifically with the score and the editing and the creation of the look and feel has been phenomenal. I mean, I give them, the two of them, just as much credit as anybody else, involved with the projects that we do, because they bring it to life. I can edit. I'm a hack editor. I edited a lot of the first film, and it kind of shows, because I'm not an editor by trade. But Patrick is really, really good at what he does, and he and I have worked very closely together to create something that looks as good as it does. And Anton is fantastic to work with, because he interprets my ideas into something that creates a musical palette that fits perfectly with the film. So those things are very, very important. So I think the biggest obstacle that I would say was building trust, getting people to believe that we could do what we said that we could do. And it started with Stan Romanek, and he didn't know who we are. His first response to us is that he didn't trust us, and his whole thing was that I've been burned before, Hollywood and media companies who've come and told me one thing and then turned around and did something completely different and made me look foolish. And how am I to know that you're not going to do the same thing?
Yeah,
so
true.
it took us 2 years to get to the point where we built that trust enough that Stan said, "Okay, let's work with you guys." And over the course,
tell him about the fact that we got a really good recommendation from high up. Way.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Part of our starting the process with Stan, it started with connecting through some of the people that Jack had met that introduced us, then having a couple of phone calls, exchanges that were initial introductions. And then shortly after that, we had a kind of an intervention with Audrey, was what Stan called it, which was, he believed, was communication from above, from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And we had a phone call one day that connected me, Patrick, the person that we were working with, that different Patrick that we were working with in the initial production company, one other person, and attempted to connect with Jack, who was interviewing somebody in prison that day and had to leave his phone in his car, so he wasn't available. But it connected all of us. And during that call, the voice came on to us 3 different times and started communicating with us. And after that, shortly after that, Stan said, if Audrey and they are good enough, think you guys are good enough, then you're good enough for me. And that started, building the process. But part of that, part of the storytelling issues there, especially with someone's personal story, is they have to feel protected, that their best interests are taken into consideration. So there was numerous discussions in regards to licensing the rights to Stan's book. And that's really what we use as the foundation for telling the story, was his book. And, he wanted to make sure that his story was protected, and rightfully so. But we had a lot of negotiation and issues and renegotiations and issues again, and then reassignment of the contract to J3 Films. And, there's a lot that goes into, making a film, and projects that, get waylaid sometimes. But I would say the trust was the biggest thing. But after we made that first film and people saw that we were telling the story from an emotional perspective, as opposed to from just the phenomena, that we had people reaching out to us. We had experts in the industry that, after they had seen it, said that you guys are doing something different. And then when we started working on the second film and reaching out to the community using Jack's connections and Lori Wagner's connections, and meeting with Chase Klotsky and having Chase introduce us to her connections, and meeting Richard Dolan. And before you know it, after we're done with the second film, we're connected to pretty much we're connected to the Mount Rushmore of paranormal, or of ufology. So that really helped us quite a bit. And then the second film came out, and the quality of the second film was so much better than the first one. And people were just like, we want to work with you guys. I mean, we were stunned when, I don't think we were stunned. We were happily surprised when we won the best documentary and fan choice, or Viewer Choice Award at the International UFO Congress. That was a big deal for us, especially when you consider what we're, in the same category with. That meant a lot to us, and that meant that we had tremendous acceptance within that community, which I think kind of opened the doors for us even further. And the people that we'll work with moving forward on the 4th, 5th, 6th film, whatever we decide to do next, we have access to all of the best people within the community of expertise. But we've also shown experiencers that we care about them, and that we are compassionate storytellers delivering their unique experiences.
Most definitely, I could vouch for that. And do you we can follow the public stuff. Do you guys, what's happening on the sidelines? Are you guys having contact? Are you having weird stuff going on? Do you feel safe?
We've had some weird stuff happen just recently here in where we're staying in Argentina. It might not be anything that's a big deal, but it's happened twice in the last week. We have limited storage in the place that we're staying at, so we have 2 of the chairs that are at the table we've used as kind of storage. So we're stacking things on top of it. So we go grocery shopping and we bring some stuff in. One of the chairs, twice we've stored bananas on them, just basically put them in the middle of the seat. The chairs are flat. They're not sloped in any way that they could fall off, but 2 different occasions where we've come downstairs in the morning, the bananas have been sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor.
Oh my gosh. Not on the kitchen floor.
So it's like, okay,
oh my God.
Just anywhere but the kitchen floor.
Yeah, but it's just bizarre that it's happened twice, and
Yeah.
Insert bad joke right here.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, tell me that, John.
No, it happened again just a couple of days ago. But it's just one of those things that when it's happened twice. My wife's had a couple of things that she's kind of experienced, at night, both times consciously, thinking that something is present. And she said, I wasn't asleep, I wasn't dreaming. Another one just happened just a couple of days ago, where she said that she felt that there was energy in the room, and she said, unfortunately, John, the energy was emanating off of you. And she said, I don't know if that means that there was something negative there. She said, but when you're starting to experience things like that, we've had a couple of other things that we really can't talk about that we've had experiences with that have been mind-blowing in the sense that and we're not saying that we can't share them, because there's some it's more about protecting the people that are involved with them, and we don't want to share too much of the storytelling as it pertains to that. Not that we're ever going to be able to do anything about it, because of the individuals that are involved. There's younger people that are involved in this that could be jeopardized as a result of that, and actually have had outreach that would make you think that there's awareness that these children are being monitored, and that's horrific. And we would not want to bring any light to something like that could expose them even further to something that could be considered negative. And negative in the sense not from entities, but from
human
beings. Those are the type of things that we're very conscious about.
Sure.
That's how I think it works, though. Like you open up, something is opened up you, that something, a switch is turned on, right? And you go down this road, and the people around you start to experience things. So John, your wife, and Chris, I'm sure people around you as well. And same here, like all of a sudden, because you're around, and all of a sudden they're there for whatever happens. And that started really the people around Stan at the time where things would happen. And we were warned before we did it. It says, if you guys decide to do this, you're all gung-ho about doing it. If you decide to do it and it actually happens, you better be ready for what happens to you personally, because you're going into something here that there's a lot of unknowns, and it's pretty hairy. And of course I was all gung-ho. So was John, and nothing horrible happened by any means. It was more, I think, enlightening than anything else, which is incredible. We should all be on that journey. That's the journey we're on. But there have been times, like John just mentioned, where you worry about certain people, or you worry about the fact, well, they're younger, and what's going. And again, it's not just the ETs that you have to worry whether they're malevolent or benevolent, but it's the government and these other darker government agencies or individuals that you really worry about, because they're not so nice. And there's a history with that. So it's the kind of thing where we go down this, and then more and more happens, and then we become more, John, I'm not going to mention her name, but your wife, you can mention if you want, but I'm not going to. But your wife has become like, she's on a journey now. And you've been on a journey, right? You've already been on it. You've been on the journey. She is on this journey. And I would say, I don't know, 20 years ago, I don't think she was on this journey.
6 months ago, she wasn't on this journey.
Well, no, Seattle, some things that happened. I mean, there was a little bit.
Yeah, some of it was, but that was more, kind of like eye-opening type of stuff and just curiosity. This is more, it was external. It was an external influence, and now it is more a personal desire to seek things. She's made more of a conscious decision to be tuned into metaphysical things, and does a lot of meditation, a lot of kind of energy work, through meditation and thought and guided meditations and things like that, which is, I think, a positive thing for anybody.
Oh yeah, it's
Always,
awesome.
there's always something that kind of like, kicks the ball, gets it rolling down the hill, and then the momentum really is really what picks up. And but it's been interesting because I would say that, for me, I questioned, like I said earlier, religion when I was 4 years old. And, I remember it to this day. I had a conversation in the kitchen with my parents and told them I was struggling with the whole idea of what eternity was. And it just made no sense to me. And I remember being curled up on the floor crying, basically saying that this makes no sense. This makes no sense to me. So, it was basically this concept was, so when I die, whether I die when I'm 5 years old or when I'm 90 years old, I sit up on a cloud playing a harp with wings for eternity. I said that makes no sense to me. This is a 4-year-old kid having those conversations.
Right.
And
right.
I was born and raised Roman Catholic, and never bought into it. I kind of did it because my parents expected me to. And then I was fortunate enough that when I was, I think, around 12, 13 years old, my dad started a softball league, playing in a softball league. And the games were on Sunday mornings, which was awesome because I didn't have to go to church anymore.
That's so cool.
That's so awesome.
Such a rebel.
I know, right?
When I was 23 years old, I was working at the company that Jack, when I would eventually meet up with Jack a few years later, I was working across from somebody who was at that time in her late 30s, early 40s, and we formed a really quick relationship, friendship. And at one time we were working on a weekend, and she asked me if I had ever, been exposed to any New Age stuff, and we started talking about TM, transcendental meditation, and that she was really into it. And she started sharing things with me, and there was this curiosity with me. It was like, wow, this sounds really interesting. And I remember she brought in a book for me to read, and it was the New Age Primer was, I think, the name of the book. And I remember reading that book in a couple of hours, and I was just like, this means everything to me. This makes sense to me. This is logical to me. And it basically was saying that, our souls are reborn, regenerated, or it's about energy. It's about positive, negative, neutral. And the things that I learned as a result of that, it wasn't so much learning as much as it was reawakening. I felt like it was like I read this book and I was like, this is the knowledge that I've always known. I've just been reintroduced to it in a way that guided me moving forward into, what I would do from that point on. I never went into it hook, line, and sinker. I just found tremendous comfort in knowing that that made more sense to me. The whole idea of reincarnation made more sense to me. The idea that we come from source made more sense to me. I strongly believe that anything and everything in this universe comes from the same source, same energy. We are then and therefore all brethren. We are all of the same. Therefore, there is no reason to be divisive. There's no reason to be afraid if we do come from that same energy source. So it's more a matter of our journey back to the source is what I think is the most interesting part of it all, is that how do we get back? And when we get back, what does that mean? And when we get back, do we see things differently and then kind of reboot back into a meat suit for another go around the sun? That's the fantastic question, the thing that I think are all interested in learning about. So, one of the things I think that Jack and I have spent a lot of time talking about is that, why are we here? What happens when we die? The curiosity behind all that makes for a very interesting existence in this lifetime, as opposed to just, doing the same old every day, going through the motion and not challenging your convictions and not challenging what you've been led to believe, and just kind of absorbing yourself into the daily grind because that's all you know. So we want to challenge people to kind of think outside the box. And we've had some success with that. We've had people who have come up to us and said, I never thought about this before. And now that I've seen this, you've opened my eyes to something that has never occupied space in my mind before. And now I need to rethink some of the things that I've been brought up to believe as a result of that. So that's really our ultimate goal with the films, is to challenge people to You can't tell the whole story in an hour and 45 minutes. It just can't be done. And our objective with these things is to challenge people to do more research, to do the
What-
research on your own.
on their own, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, that was, go ahead.
Yeah. So you go about it as you have. Do you have a question? A simple question in mind that you're trying to answer in that 2 to 3 hour shortened time period? Or when you start investigating, when you start doing the research for the actual film, are you having one question? Are you having a question for yourself and other people, or how do you? It's like that umbrella idea. What? the feeling I get from you're answering really big questions about existence, right?
Yeah, I look when we started working on the Stan Romanek story. The big question for us is this a story worth telling? So first, we both read the book, and the book is fascinating. And your thought when you finish reading the book is, if this stuff really happened, this is incredible. So then the next question is, well, let us see the evidence. And Jack and I spent a week at Stan's house going through all the evidence, and he was fortunate enough to document a lot of the things that had happened to him. So we spent a week going through all the evidence that he had, and bins of evidence, both papers and video and audio and photographs, and looked at everything to the point where Stan was like, "Do you find this interesting?" Watch the video tonight, and it was like, "Absolutely, it's incredible." So my takeaway from that, after that week, I was convinced that this was a story worth telling, and really what we wanted to do was present people with the evidence. And one, present the evidence. Two, allow people to have an emotional connection to Stan, that he's a human being. He's not some, freak, out there. What people, I think, at the end of the day, when they saw the film, if you're a hater, you're going to hate anyway. We really don't care what your opinion is. That's not a big deal to us. But when people saw the film, they felt that Stan was a normal person that had something extraordinary happen to him. And I think most of the people, we had people come up to us and say, "I don't know if I believe everything that was presented, but I can tell you one thing: I sure as heck wouldn't want to be Stan." Because I think they're challenging their belief system as a result of that. So that's really what our intention was with the first film, was to tell the story of a man who had been isolated by his experiences, ridiculed by his experiences, to show people that we need to be aware and compassionate that an individual could have these experiences. And by the way, introduce the concept of hybridization. So that was really the first step. Jack and I had numerous conversations about how to approach the first film, and I was adamant, coming from the bigger picture, that we not go too deep, get too woo-woo crazy with it, because there's a lot of unbelievable stuff that we could have explored with Stan's story, that I felt that if we went that way first, that we would have lost the audience, and we would just be more or less pandering to people who already believed or already were aware of his story. So we said, let's step it way back. We'll introduce the children towards the end, because if we start with that, we might lose people. So our mentality with the first film was to lead the horse to water, and get them to start to get a taste of it, to drink. And then, with additional films that we do moving forward, we would get them, to immerse themselves even further into the trough, so to speak. And with the second film, that was really driven by the responses that we got to Stan's film, and the fact that so many people shared their experiences and said, "This happened to me too." The compassion component of that was really very clear to us, is that too many people aren't willing to tell their stories. Too many people are afraid to be out there, but so therefore are isolated in their own thoughts, and saying that this happened to me, but no one's going to believe me. No one's going to listen to me. And by having the first film come out and have people say, "Thank you for making me realize that I'm not crazy," that kind of told us that we needed to do another story that was more focused on the individuals. And we were aware of the whole idea of the unexplained pregnancies as a result of meeting Sierra in 2009, 2010, when we were working on Stan's film, and we heard her story, and we, immediately said to each other, "This would make a great film, this whole idea of the unexplained pregnancies. I had never heard of it before. And then we started doing a little bit of research and realized that there was a lot of people out there who were sharing those stories. And then when we started the whole idea of that being the focus of the film, we reached out to our connections and said, who do you know that would be willing to go on air? And we got 35 people that we interviewed and spent hours with, and before we culled it down to the people who were in the film. And several of the people that, you know, we really wanted to have in the film, we didn't. One of them was your guest last week or 2 weeks ago. She at the time was not willing to go forward with her story.
Tiffany Mack.
Yeah.
And you know, John, we had Sierra on last week.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we got a really, really good stuff. I mean, you know, Tiffany's story was, as you know, is incredible. But when she just, like you said, she wasn't ready to come on. It wasn't time. You know, she knew she was going to be going through a divorce.
We're ready to hear your guys' stories. I'm going to get 1,000 emails by making T-shirts for people, you know, in honor of contactees and people who are public with their opinions. But no, you know, you guys, it just took so much bravery to do what you did, and the people in your films are brave people.
Yeah, we just wanted to create a megaphone, you know, and to show them as normal people, not as fringy people, because too many people think that, you know, the ones who have this happen to them are the fringes of society. And by bringing people that look like your next door neighbor, your best friend, a member of the family, I think it makes it seem much more real than it would be if it was just somebody, you know, from, you know, the backwoods of small town America type of thing. But for the second film, the focus was really compassion. And that was driven home by Melinda. When we interviewed her, it was like, this is the essence of the story. Melinda Leslie. It was like, once I was holding back tears interviewing her because of how raw and emotional she was. And she even said at the time, I'm not usually like this. I don't allow myself to go there. But she was very vulnerable.
She's not.
And
she's tough. She's tough. Yeah.
It was a fantastic interview, and it made us realize that this is the essence of the story that we have to lead with, is to get people to understand that they need to be compassionate first and foremost. So, you know, the second film was all about creating awareness. Partially was a big part of the story by sharing the stories. 2 was to show compassion to people who've had an experience that you might not understand, or that you haven't had yourself. Just because you haven't had it doesn't mean it didn't happen to them. And 3rd is for the people who've had the experiences to seek community, to find people to talk to, whether it's other experiencers or people who can help them contextualize what had happened to them, and, you know, frame it in a way that they can cope with it, deal with it, manage it in their lives. But the 3rd film, where we are with this one right now, was, okay, so the first film was about experiences. The first film guides you from lights in the sky to a personal abduction story to hybrid children. So it kind of takes you on that journey there. The second film focused on hybridization, what that process of hybridization was, individuals who have been part of a program, the experiences that they had, and then the desire and need for us to be compassionate towards our fellow humans who have had an experience that we can't quite understand. The third film is to drive that nail even further of awareness. And there's going to be 3 parts. This film is about historical context. You know, Ancient Aliens has done a fantastic job, but we think it's important to just remind people that this has been happening for millennia. There have been documentation going back thousands of years in cave paintings and texts that have had drawings in them that illustrate in paintings, you know, in medieval times, that indicate that there's been sky people who have been visiting. And that's a big part of the existence of the unexplained. We don't know what happened 2,000 years ago, but it's documented in some way, shape, or form. So to create this awareness that this is not new, this is not 1947 and on, these are things that have been happening for quite a long time. Second part of it is to get people to realize that just because you're of a different belief construct doesn't mean that it is not happening. So we have 3 different groups that all believe in lights in the sky, abduction and hybridization. Each one of these groups strongly believe that these things are happening, but their outcomes are very, very different. So the biblical narrative is that this is all leading to the great deception and the return of Jesus. So this is leading us. Everything that has happened to this date has happened because the Bible has foreseen it. These things are all anticipated. And as the different people that we interviewed specifically about the biblical narrative said, is that the Bible is right 100% of the time with what is going on. So 100% of the time, the Bible is right with the evolution of this process, and that we're getting close to that. They firmly believe that, and that's their construct, and that's fine. Another group is the people who believe in ascension, more of the love and light, that this is a positive experience, is that we're all going to be raised, our vibration is going to be raised, and we're all going to be taken to a higher evolution. That's
you, Krista. That's your part.
Well, my part is also to read Mahabharata, Ramayana, some little Hebrew Bible, a little Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, because when you don't just stick to one book, one manuscript, you see there's some kind of common thread. At least this is what I, from doing over a couple thousand psychic readings, is you find commonalities with people. And it's really, our message is sure, your Bible is correct, and that's an important part of the big story.
Well, I think one of the things that we want to make people understand with this is, just because you believe something doesn't mean that it's right. So the way that we're going to take this, and again, this is where I sit, I'm looking at this from an objective point of view. There will be conflict in this section of the film. The third part is colonization. So there are people, Dr. Jacobs in particular, and when he's interviewed in the film, is very adamant about what the outcome is going to be, and it's not going to be positive according to him. So you have the biblical narrative, Jesus returns; ascension, we're taken to a higher vibration, and then colonization is that we're basically replaced. So those are the three, but all three of them believe in the exact same thing, but the outcomes are very different. Sounds very similar to political beliefs. It's my way's the right way. You're wrong. If you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong. So really what we're trying to do with that part of the film is to say to people, just because you believe something doesn't necessarily make it right. It just is what your belief construct is. So the middle of the film, the kind of heart of the film, is going to be examining these three different belief structures. And we're going to have people talking about it where they basically stick their feet in the ground and say, this is why what we believe is happening. And there is going to be some tension there, because not everybody who believes in ascension believes the other two, and you can say the same for the colonization as well as for the biblical. They don't believe, and they firmly believe that these others are absolutely positively wrong. So that creates an interesting dynamic, that you can firmly believe in ufology and lights in the sky, abductions, and hybridization, but yet you disagree on what the outcome is going to be. But then we kind of bring it all home in the final act of the film, when we bring in three people who have connections to the government, who talk about their unique experiences, that when you hear some of the stories that are told, your hair will stand up, because it basically confirms that the government has been aware and has employed people to be conduits, liaisons, and on special secret above top secret clearance to be involved in programs that connect them directly to ET and or ET driven initiatives. So when you kind of take it from the lights in the sky that Stan captures, all the way through government people telling you that they were part of a program that the government not only believed in, sanctioned, and had them engaged in. It wasn't a surprise; they were recruited into it. In one case with Dan Sherman, he was basically tagged as a child as being someone that, when he got to this point in his career and he joined the military, that he was going to be introduced to something, because he was basically selected to be a part of this program at a very, very early age, because of DNA and family connection to the military, and being involved in a program, as a result of that. So our message at the end of this trilogy is that go from the lights in the sky all the way to the beliefs construct that military people have had experiences with, that they're willing to talk about openly and honestly and vulnerably. There's some tears shed as some of the interviews that we did, and
Oh.
very powerful moments when someone is sharing something that they basically say that people don't believe me, but this happened to me. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There would be no reason for me to lie. So those are things that we, want people to take away. If you were to look at all three films, what we would want people at the end of them is to realize that you now are armed with information to do your own research, to take a little bit further. You have awareness that you didn't have before seeing these three films. Now that you're done, your responsibility is to do more research on your own, to fill in the blanks, find out what camp you fit in, what resonates with you, and to question your current belief construct if you're not a believer, and just to say, what if we don't know? Our opening salvo with the first film was, what if this is all true? And if we come from that perspective with the films that we make, is to, it might not be. It might be something completely different. It just might be Occam's razor. It is what it is. It's the simplest explanation. We're here, we die, and that's it. It's over. We don't know that. In the same way that people who believe what they believe, they have faith in what they believe. There is no definitive answers to what happens on the other side because we don't have definitive proof. Our journey with this is to help people question what they currently believe and to seek additional answers by doing, research, seeing more films that help them better understand what may or may not be happening around them.
I feel like Jack has a tough question coming up.
Oh, what question came to my mind? Krista, you can read my mind. That's really weird because I was going to ask all of us this question because it literally came to my mind as Jon, you were speaking. Do you think we were chosen? Do you think we were selected to do what we do? So in other words, and the reason I asked that is we were told on our end, Jon, that we were chosen, quote unquote, to do the Romanek story because we had work to do. We were chosen for a reason. Krista, I'm sure you were chosen to be a channel. I mean, are people chosen? Do we, and this is not an ego thing because there's a lot of crap that comes with this, a lot. Okay. But are we chosen? Is it that they're selecting us to do this stuff?
My personal opinion on that is I don't know for sure, but what kind of resonates with me, what kind of makes sense is that it wasn't so much that we were chosen, is that we chose this. Our
Right.
essence, whatever our energy is in a before being incarnated in this human form, we chose this journey. And, based on, people that I've been exposed to, readings that I've had, conversations that I've had with psychics and intuitives and other people who have much greater knowledge and access to this information than I have, is that this was something that I am on a journey of learning. More than anything, it's learning. And by doing what we do, learning what we've learned, sharing what we've learned is going to encourage other people to do the same thing. So our mission, more than anything, is to help people, stimulate people to think that what they have come to know and believe might not be real, or it might be more than what they believe. So from that point of view, I think the poking of the stick in in the back, kind of like, what is that, is more a matter of it's time to move forward with this. I go back all the way to being a kid wanting to be a filmmaker. When I was very young, I've always, Steven Spielberg was kind of like my idol as a kid. I remember watching Duel, his first made-for-television film back in the early 70s, and loving that movie. And that was kind of like the very first thing that he did. And that was kind of like, to me, the evolution that he went from there to Sugarland Express, to Jaws, to E.T., to, it just was kind of, Close Encounters was like, whoa, I want to do the same thing. So, at a very young age, 12, 13 years old, wanting to be, a filmmaker, and that storytelling, it's been something that I was passionate about. And when I started working at the company that Jack was at, I was, first week that I was there, they said, hey, we're going to be doing, every year we do this holiday video. Would you like to be involved? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to be involved. And within 2 years, I wound up kind of directing that whole process, and did that for about 10 years. And that was really kind of like the foundational work that I learned the basics about directing, shooting, editing, and kind of built my awareness around that by just playing in that sandbox. So that was a lot of fun.
So,
But yeah, to answer your question though, is that I think it's more that we chose this as opposed to they chose us. We knew coming in that this was going to be our mission, journey, purpose.
do you remember any of the other content that was out around the time that you were watching Spielberg? What kind of other stuff was out there? Was it
Chariots of the Gods. I remember seeing that.
Yeah,
And then also, what was the Leonard Nimoy show back in the 70s that came out shortly after? In Search of. Watching that, the curiosity of, that what else is out there. And I never really got into the, it just seems to me that at a young age, it was all kind of open-minded, from the very, very beginning, seeing the UFOs that I saw when I was young. My dad witnessed them, other people witnessed them. It wasn't like it was an isolated incident. They were reported, by numerous people to the local police, and we weren't the only ones that saw them. So those were type of things that, when you're exposed to that at a very young age, you're open to the possibility that that's a reality. And it wasn't something that I was ever tuning out. I was tuned in at a very young age and had awareness to all of that when I was, from the time I was 7, 8 years old.
So it's so fascinating how UFO is its form of technology, isn't it? It's craft. Mm-hmm. It's been crafted and made. Somebody made that with their thoughts or hands or something. And how we can accept cell phones, we can accept a TV, but somehow a spacecraft just seems so emotional for people. Why do you think that is?
Because I think we're always stuck in the moment. We're always stuck with where we are right now. We don't take the time to reflect and say, okay, let's just look at our lifetime. Jack's and mine in particular. I think you're a little bit younger. But I was born in 1963. Man walked on the moon in 1969. What came from the space program was the revolution in technology that brought us to where we are today. So when I was in, I think it was like 19, so I was like 8 or 9 years old, I got my first LED calculator, which to me was like amazing. And my dad, who was an engineer, used to use a slide rule. And he, when they first had the first Texas Instruments calculators that came out that basically replaced that, he was kind of old school and was like, well, I kind of like, using the old school stuff, but he's like, this sure makes it a lot easier to use this technology. And then you just sit there and think about what evolved from that point on is that, the personal computer first came out in 1980. That's not that far ago, far back. Cell phones, 1983. The internet, mid-90s. These are things now that are so ingrained in our lives that we can't imagine what life would be without that. And I don't want to sound like the old guy that's saying like, oh, back in the day I walked, 2 miles in the snow both ways uphill, to go to school. Type of thing. But it is fascinating when you think about what the space program did. So when Kennedy, first said by the end of this decade, we're going to put a man on the moon, and they did that in 9 years, that is incredible. But what came of that is this information technology revolution first, then information age shortly after that. But what has happened since 1969 to this point, what is that, 70, 40, 50 years later? Everything that has come as a result of that has led us to where we are today. So you can only imagine where we're going to be 50 years from now. The awareness level that we're going to have about potentially more esoteric things, connecting to energy, connecting through meditation, having the ability to manifest our outcomes a little bit more clearly by using our brains in a capacity in ways that we never have before. I'm a firm believer in the whole idea that thoughts become things, so whatever you put your mind to is what you ultimately will manifest. And so for people who feel like, one of the things I don't like to hear is that I've been given this lot in life, or this is my reality. It's like, well, then change it. change your reality, change the things that
Awesome.
you do, manifest the outcome that you want to have. So I believe that where we're going, in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years is something that we can't even begin to fathom where we are today. And I think, not to say that there's going to be a UFO landing on the White House lawn anytime soon, but we don't need that. I really don't think we're waiting for that anymore. We're not waiting for that. We're there. The awareness and the intelligence and the intuitiveness that we have towards that already exists. I just think it's a matter of exposing that to more people to flip that switch on where they tune into it. And that's, Jack and I are a firm belief that what we're doing is just basically kicking that ball and getting it rolling to down that hill and let it gain its own momentum by letting the people who see the films that we make carry the torch forward.
You guys had a show together too, didn't you? Have a talk show?
Jack did, yeah, and I was a guest on it, I guess 3 or 4 different times.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of pots cooking. Yeah,
we always have tried, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, one of the things about it too is that I wouldn't be doing what we're doing without Jack. Jack wouldn't be doing what we're doing without me. So it's been one of those things that, we both need the other person in order to do what we're doing, because I don't want to do what he does. He doesn't want to do, not to say that we couldn't, I think we could, but I think we're much better as a team when we look at it as like, this is my area of expertise and strength. This is your area of expertise. Let's leverage what each of us does very well and combine those resources to take it to another level. And, not to take anything away from the other people that we're involved with. They each play a critical role. Jamie Cernoff, Lori Wagner are just as important to what we do, because their willingness to do things that we don't want to do. So, you look for, I'm a firm believer that you surround yourself with people who know more than you do, or the things that you don't know that complement what you do, and it makes a better whole as a result of that. So I think we've had great success as a result of connecting with people who fit that mold and make our unit very cohesive and productive, and delivering high quality content that is accessible and stimulating.
Did you guys ever? Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say, and ultimately we come at it from different perspectives, and we have different strengths, I would say, and weaknesses, but ultimately we share the same larger vision. I know that I can say, I know Jon's going to take all the footage that we shot, hours and hours and hours of it, and whatever comes out at the end, I'm going to like, because we trust each other's, what we understand as story and what this should be. Well, and we talk about it beforehand, but so obviously we're always on the same page, Jon. I mean, I think that every now and again, there might be a little thing, whatever, but I mean, that's, I don't know. But ultimately I'm totally like, I once the story is there, and I know I'll tell Jon, don't you think we really need to say this in here? This is what we need to get people. This is what we need to tell. And he's like, yeah, I agree. And then boom, and I'm good. Like, cause I know that the editing process is so long, and I'm not really at that point in the editing process. A lot of times I'm on to the next story. It's really Jon and the editor that are sitting there hours on end going through the footage and really coming up with the narrative that works. But there's 8 million ways to tell a story. And I trust the way Jon tells a story. I think it's different. I think it's unique, and I think he's talented. He directed me early on in my early days. Okay. When I was Tom Cruise. Okay. When I did that little scene. So I knew he was talented. I knew what he had. I knew he had the chops back then, Krista.
Good chops.
It's interesting too, because with the second film, first film, Jack and Jamie had seen the Romanek film. Jack and Jamie had seen a festival cut before we showed it. So they had seen the rough cut of the film, and then we showed it to Stan the day that it was showing. So we showed it to him in the morning. That was the first time he had seen it. We didn't finish editing. It premiered at a festival, the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival, in I think it was November 1st of 2013. And we didn't finish editing it until October 31st, the night before.
Wow.
So we called it really close. We then polished it up with a final edit, when we finally released the film, but the festival edit didn't get done till the night before. So they had seen it, but in the second film, like Jack was saying, he trusts that whole process. That Jack and Jamie did not see anything until the festival, when it premiered at the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival again. And when they came up to me afterward, and it was interesting too, because I was a little bit nervous when we premiered Stan's film, because we're having technical issues. You know, they couldn't get it to work right. And I was like, oh God, we have 150 people in this theater and it's not going to, come out right. And it was the first time making a film. So it was more a matter of, okay, what's going to be the response? But going into the premiere of the second film, I had no butterflies whatsoever, because I knew it was good. And it has nothing to do with me. Wow. It had to do with the story. The story was so good. The people were so compelling on screen that I was completely content going in that this was going to be well received. And after seeing Jack and Jamie at first, they were like climbing over seats to get to me to say, this was amazing, absolutely spectacular. It's better than we thought it was going to be. It was just so powerful. And it was confirmation of what I already knew, but it was nice to know that, these guys entrusted me to kind of take it and run with it, and spent numerous hours with Patrick Lomentini, the editor, to get it right. And I mean, it was meticulous. I'm a detail person. It has to be, I want to say that I guess I'm a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to the visual final output. And Patrick,
but it showed. I mean, that's important.
Yeah. And Patrick and I went back and forth on so many different little things, and, tweak this little thing here and this little sound clip here. And, we got it, we dialed it in. But and I think he now feels that he completely understands the process, because with the first film, he edited the first act of the film and I edited the second and third act. So it was more a matter of he finished his part, I finished my part. We kind of merged the two together. But with the second film, he did all the editing. I didn't do any editing at all, but I directed him through the process. So it was a learning curve for both of us to go through all of that. And I think we came out with an awesome product at the back end, so that now we're entering post-production for the third film any day now. We're waiting for some funding to get through, and then we're going to really kick it off. It's going to be a much easier process, because we both know how to work with each other that much more than we did, going into the second film. So,
and I got to be honest with you, and I know I'm not objective. Like, it's hard for me to be objective, obviously, about this, but I am really stoked about the third film. Because because I think I've been looking at it from a big picture message, right? And the story we wanted to tell. And I really think this just brings it home. And I'm really excited about it. And so, especially some of the people we interviewed, you yourself included, Chris, I thought we had the best round overall interviews for this. Were just incredible every time we were done. And I remember, because no one knew you, Krista. That's really funny. We should tell the story, because I know we got to go. But we were filming in Palm Springs, because we wanted to shoot a Contact in the Desert, because we wanted to bring people. We knew there would be a lot of people that we were going to interview for the film in the same place. So we took that. We had the house for a week. It was Laurie's brother's house, and he was kind enough to give it to us for that week, so we could bring people from the conference right across the street to the house and interview them. It was just a good, cost-effective, budget way to do this. And we, every time we brought someone back, it was like better than the next. It was like, oh my God, the interviews we're getting are incredible. And then what happened was, one of the people that we had for that Ascension part couldn't do it, or I can't remember what happened. And we needed someone. And I met you, Krista.
This is 8th grade all over again.
I met you. I know, right? Like, I met you in 8th grade. So
they had this thing. Yes, 8th grade is like, you vote with superlatives. Right. And so this is like superlatives all over. We didn't have the person for best all around, but you got the second place. Like, I'll take silver in long jump too.
No, we were looking to fill that spot, and it was more. We needed somebody to talk to that.
No, true. We had Vivian, but we needed someone else. So we already had Vivian.
Vivian's in there.
We already had Vivian. Great. You and Vivian make up that part. So what happened was, we had Vivian, and we were going to interview Vivian. We were going to drive to Phoenix after, so we were going to interview her there.
You just cut it short. Yeah.
And so what happened was we met you. John was mostly at the house because John was interviewing the people. We would bring them over. And so what Patrick and I were doing was we were doing like on the spot interviews, right? It was kind of like, here we are at the conference. We're going to interview this person and that person. And we interviewed you. And as Lori said, Lori's exact words were, "Oh my God, there's Krista. You got to meet her. You're going to love her. She's absolutely a doll. She's adorable. She's an angel." And so I'm like, okay, cool. So we did.
Yeah. It progressed from
and we interviewed
the hall
you there.
to the house.
Well, here's the thing, because when we interviewed you there, you said some things that we were rolling on the floor laughing. You were really funny. And was like, and you weren't afraid to say what was on your mind. Let's just leave it at that.
What it was about.
I remember when you came over, you were kind of like, what the F have I gotten myself into?
Yeah. Right. Because all the cameras and all this stuff.
The gear was there. And it was like, all of a sudden you had this moment of, I'm going to be on film. I'm going to be in a movie. Holy shit.
This is a nice team. These people are nice. These people are taking this stuff seriously. I had been burned. I went to Hollywood. I didn't tell you guys. I think I've been shelved like 2 times, humiliated over and over and over again.
It's hard. Most people don't do it right, and they don't respect other people. But anyway, thank you for saying that. But John, what did I say when I got back that day? I remember because we're all outside, and it was beautiful. Beautiful scenery there in Palm Springs. And I said, John, I told Lori on the way home, I'm like, we need Krista's the other person. I think she'll really be good. And Lori's like, yeah, definitely. Let's talk to John when we get home. And we got back to the house. I'm like, John, I think we found our person. And John has a certain amount of trust in me as well. I mean, I'm not always dead on right about everything by any means, but I think when he sees me get excited about something, he knows there's something there.
He has spiritual powers for sure.
You know what I mean, though, John? Like you knew that at least, and you knew you could work with it at the very least.
Another thing too, when we were talking about doing a podcast, we were talking about having him do a solo podcast specifically about very similar to what you guys ultimately wound up doing. And he came to me and he said, the more and more I think about this, it would make more sense for me to do this with somebody else versus me doing it by myself. He said, because there'll be a commitment to do it if I have a partner in it versus just me. And then he said, and I think I know who that person is. And I said, Krista? And he's like, yeah, Krista. And because it was more a matter of, there's an energy thing. There is a yin yang thing that goes on there. I think there's the, more of the demographics too, is to make sure that you're reaching the it's again part of our mantra, reach the widest audience possible. So by bringing in 2 perspectives that you guys have, I thought it was a perfect match to do something like that. But yeah, when we started interviewing you and once you got comfortable, I thought you shared a lot of great things.
Yeah.
I think it's
help
going
me
to
get out of the acting of like I'm in my astrology says I'm an actor. I have these characters, and it was the funny one. And you're kind of helping me get out of character at the conference. Like you're in a documentary now, which has never really happened in that way. So, I think God gave you blessed you with a calming voice and a psychic ability.
Well, I think the one thing that what I enjoy the conversation, and I always look at interviews as a conversation, not I always say to people that, just imagine that we're sitting at a bar having a conversation about X topic, whatever that might be, to kind of put them in the mindset that there's no right or wrong answers. There's no pressure on you. It's more about speaking from your strength, your knowledge, your awareness. What you bring to the table is your personal experience. And what we're trying to pull out in those interviews is that knowledge that you have. So my approach always with every interview is that you don't start getting the essence of the interview until about halfway through. So you ask a lot of the foundational basic questions to get that comfort level, involved. And sometimes asking the same question more than once at different points during the interview to get variety and a better answer. So if I were to ask you a question in the very beginning that was about your connection to ascension and what that means to the grand scheme of things as it pertains to the ascension paradigm, your answer is going to be very different than it would be an hour later. An hour later, you're going to be much more comfortable. You're going to be in the flow of the conversation. You're going to have a much more thoughtful, intent, and
Especially
Easy.
after all those drinks we had. No.
Oh, that's funny.
I think we had Coke. I think it was Coke and cookies and some other junk food.
Coca-Cola.
It was Coca-Cola.
Yes, Coca-Cola. Yeah. We don't play that.
That's right. And a huge bag of peanut M&Ms that courtesy of Jamie Cernoff.
Yeah, trippy.
Buying the big bags. We always know that's one. If there's one area of budgeting that we have to do a better job at, is budgeting food. We have a tendency to send somebody home with a huge box of food at the end of a shoot because we bought too much of it. And but one of the things one point that I would like to make, before the end, is that one of the things that people, when they think of these, is that filmmakers have an agenda. They're out to make money. They don't understand why we're charging, to see a film, and why it's so expensive. And I mentioned it earlier. It's basically to pay back the expense to make it. So we don't have $500,000 budgets or $1 million budgets. Our budgets are very, very thin, very, very lean. And I'm joking about the food thing. We're talking about hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. But it's more a matter of how can we make the best possible film at the lowest possible cost. And everybody's under the impression that, the filmmaker, I want to make it very clear, is that the people that are involved as producers, we don't get paid anything until the film has paid off everything else. So we have to pay off all the people in production. So there's pre-production costs, pre-production costs, production costs, post-production costs. All of that is what is required to get the film out to the public. We don't see a penny until after the film pays all that off, and then there's revenue that is coming in. So, for example, this film was finished shooting 2 years ago, and expenses were paid, for that. We didn't start seeing money trickling into us until I think it was January, end of January. So our efforts are not to make money. Our efforts are to get out and tell a good story that stimulates people to think and answer questions and, ask that one question, what if this is all true? So we're not in it necessarily for the money by any means, because we don't get anything up front. We might get something on the back end if the film does well. So it's on us to make sure we make something of high quality, that we're engaged throughout the process to promote it. And that was just as much work. I think Jack and I discovered that in July, August, and September. We did, I think, over almost 30 different radio and podcast interviews over the course of about 35 days.
Yeah.
A lot of grueling work, and then a lot of engagement on social media, and a lot of work. So, you have pre-production, production, post-production, distribution, and promotion. Those are all parts of the game, and it's a lot of work. So we did all those things up front, knowing that maybe down the road something might trickle our way. So we're doing it because we enjoy the process, the creative work that goes into it, and also because we think that we have an opportunity to stimulate people into thinking deeper.
Incredible. Well, you guys, this is so close. Director's cut here, getting down.
Longer. Oh my, hour and 27 minutes. Woof.
Michael Cimino.
Record books.
So people are gonna be watching this. I know it's one time. People are gonna be watching this after part 3 comes out. What's next?
Oh gosh,
that's a great question. Yeah.
Really for us, there's a couple of different things that we've explored as a result of what we've encountered. There's also some newer stories that aren't necessarily connected to ufology or paranormal, but are mind benders in the sense that we've been led to believe something that might not be true. Based on something that's happened on a narrative that has been created and manifested over time. One of them has to do with the CIA. Another one has to do with religion, and probably the next one that we would like to do has to do with experiences in southwestern Missouri, that if we can get cooperation from people that were involved in this, we're talking upwards of 60 plus people who are involved in experiences that happened throughout that region in the mid to late 90s. It will blow people's minds, because these are sightings and military engagement and black ops, and it's unbelievable what's happened. But the story can't be told unless we get cooperation from the people who were a part of it. And what we're trying to do in talking to them is that a lot of them don't want to go public with the story, even though collectively they've all had the same experience, because they don't want to draw attention. But they've all been dealing with something for 20 plus years.
They want to tell you the story. Is that true? They want to tell you their story, but they don't want to be the public ones. Is that right?
They're more than willing to tell the story as long as they're not.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. But our whole thing is that what we're trying to help them is that by going public with your story, you are going to help a lot of other people who have had the same thing. And if you go public with your story as a group, it's not one person that's taking all of the spotlight isn't shined on one person. It's spread across an entire group of people. So if we could get 20 people, 30 people to say we would be willing to be, even in a group setting, to say, I was here when some of the things that were happening, that will go a long way to creating credibility and establishing a foundation from which to tell the story. But that's a fascinating one. There's the religious one would be a passion project for both Jack and I, because we've talked about doing films in this specific genre for a long time, which is creating awareness around something that is different than what organized religion has been led to believe. And the feature in this film is a Greek Orthodox priest who tells a story that is mind-blowing. So this is something that would make a fascinating story. I think this film, with what we've experienced so far with this individual, would be, one, controversial, two, and there's no such thing as bad PR when it comes to this, because I really do feel that Christianity would attack this film, left and right, even though the person who's the center of it is a Christian. But it is something that when we get to this film, I think it's going to get a tremendous amount of awareness, and therefore a lot of people minds opened up as a result of this. And some of the things that we've talked about with this individual as it pertains to the New Testament, that the New Testament is nothing but a bunch of stories. And and he said, and I can prove that. I can prove that these are nothing but a bunch of stories. So pretty fascinating stuff, especially as it pertains to coming from someone of the cloth, so to speak. Interesting stuff. So we have a lot of other things, and I'm sure we'll get, we have another project that just came, our way, potential project within the last week and a half. We had another one last year that was phenomenal that didn't quite pan out because there's no funding attached to it, and still fantastic opportunity if some of the things that we had been exposed to turn out to be true. So yeah, there's tons of opportunities for us, and yeah, we'll hopefully get to some of those so that we can come back down the road and share those. That would be awesome.
Cool.
I mean, so much respect to you for addressing the huge topic of religion. I've been told just stick to one controversial topic and then you'll be safe. So you guys have, you've covered ET phenomena, you've covered ancient knowledge, you've covered hybrid children, you've covered belief systems from the fifth layer of our work field, and you're having a multicultural, mixed cast. You propagate teamwork. The only word I can think of is benevolent for this type of career, and just really grateful. Thank you for obviously having me on that third part. So I know all of us on behalf of all millennials, we are totally looking forward to this real magic, because millennials want the real magic, not the fake stuff. They're all watching the magic shows, but this is the real deal. So you guys have to click the links below.
Real magic.
Yeah, magic is real.
That's cool.
And is there any other websites, links, titles that you would want?
Sure. Yeah, I would, if you've made it this far, it means you're interested. So we really appreciate you listening to this point. And please do us a favor and go over to facebook.com/EX2 the seating, and follow, and comment. And we definitely would enjoy the opportunity for you to engage with us. The other thing would be to take a visit to our J3 Films website, just so that you know that it's there. If you have anything that you want to share, the best place to do it is on the contact page. And then we also have a film website for the film, extraordinarytheseating.com, and that has links to all the different places that you can see the film. The film is currently available on a bunch of different paid-for platforms. It's also available for free if you're a member of Amazon Prime. But in the coming days and weeks, it's going to be available for free on a lot of advertising video on demand platforms. So, those things we'll be announcing as they roll out. So, Roku and QB, not the new thing, but there's a whole bunch of different platforms, YouTube, AVOD platform, Vimeo. There's a whole bunch of different platforms where will be available for free in the next several weeks. So we're looking forward to that.
You heard it, guys. Great work, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Jon. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. Let's do it again.
Definitely.